Can we give it up for the well one more time? The whole team. We're going to get to hear from them and be blessed by them many times throughout our hangout this weekend. So, friends, we are getting ready to dive right into our first jazz note. Are you ready? Okay. So our first jazz note, I am super excited about, and it is speaking directly to our theme for this gathering. So I want to welcome Bishop David Wilson, who is the resident bishop of the Great Plains Episcopal area of the United Methodist Church. Me and the bishop also sit on a committee together, a board actually, General Board of Higher Education and Ministry. And I'm just really grateful for his witness, his leadership, and that he's with us today. So Bishop David Wilson, can we welcome him as he brings us our first jazz note?
Thank you, Michael, for my walk-up song. Now, you folk could be in trouble. This is one of my favorite songs. You know how long it is in its entirety? 8 minutes and 49 seconds. It could be a good filler for if you're trying to stall for time in the local church for that. Get together. So the last time I was here, I got shamed out because I came and of course I had my bishop's attire on, and I was the only person wearing hard shoes at that event. So Michael, I made up for it this time with these new shoes. You can't see them from here, but it has my tribal logos and my Episcopal sign. So I was ready. I had them made almost special for this occasion. So I'm ready to go. Thank you, Michael, and Fresh Expressions for having me back for this event, and especially noting the theme, talking about 7 generations. And so I got to talk about that the last time I was here and get to share that. And so thank you so much for that. How many were here last year? Raise your hand. Okay. Maybe repeat a little bit what I did the last time around. But what I want to give a preview for this next video piece that kind of summarizes this piece about understanding what 7 generations is. It's coming up. You don't have the video, and that's okay. We'll go with the flow. We'll get that together. So the reason I thought about that video was that I shared the last time around that among, at first I thought it was just the Haudenosaunee people in the upper northeastern part of the country who had this philosophy of 7 generations. And as I traveled across the country, Indian country, there are many tribes who carried this philosophy there. And so what it tells us is that there are 6 tribal nations in the upper northeast part of this country who make up the Haudenosaunee Confederacy here. Oral tradition says that this confederacy has existed since time immemorial. This country even modeled its own U.S. Constitution after their own Confederacy Constitution. Oren Lyons was a faith keeper, the Onondaga Nation. He writes about the philosophy and how they operate. So he said, the 7th generation philosophy is integral to the Haudenosaunee way of life. It intensifies the bond of community, promotes stability, and provides concrete values with which each person can test his or her everyday actions. And although they practice ancient traditions, listen to this. This is what many of you are about. Their culture is not frozen in the past. Their ability to adapt to dramatic change and survive on their own terms is historically proven. Again, the work that many of you are doing. But they're equally focused on the next generations. So here's what he said. The peacemaker taught us about 7 generations. He said, when you sit in the council for the welfare of your people, even as we sit here in this body for the welfare of the people we serve, you must not think about yourself, not even your own family, not even your own generation. But he said, make your decisions on behalf of the next 7 generations coming so that they may enjoy what you have today. Think about that. Think about the next 7 generations coming so that they may enjoy what you have today. And he goes further to say, the nations of the Haudenosaunee people believe that we borrow the earth. Listen to this. We borrow the earth from our children's children, and it is our duty to protect it and its culture for future generations. All decisions made now are made with future generations in mind, who will inherit the earth. So think about this. We do our work, and as we think about what we borrow from our children's children for the work and ministry that we do. So as I looked again at this thought, I shared, I thought it was just for the folk in the upper northeast and find other people. Crazy Horse, noted Ogallala Lakota warrior, shared this prophecy. And he said, upon suffering, beyond suffering, the red nation shall rise again, and it shall be a blessing for a sick world, a world filled with broken promises, selfishness, and separations, a world longing for light once again. And he said, I see a time of 7 generations when all of the colors of mankind will gather under the sacred tree of life, and the whole earth will become one circle once again. And in that day, he said, in that day will be those among the Lakota who will carry knowledge and understanding of unity among all living things. And the young white ones will come to those of my people and ask for this wisdom. And I salute the light within your eyes where the whole universe dwells. For when you are at the center within you, I am in that place within me, and we shall all be one. Aren't those beautiful, powerful images that he shares, thinking about that, not just one race, but all the colors of humankind around the world with that. So as we do our work in ministry, to come to listen to our, be part of our immersions this afternoon, I think about the question we need to ask ourselves. What does it look like for us to use these practices of looking ahead 7 generations, not thinking about ourselves, which is very, very hard to do, but rather thinking about the generations yet to come. And so what does it look like for us to think about how we include all colors of humankind? And isn't that a beautiful image that he puts before us for that? You must not think about yourself, your own family, and not even the coming generations. My friends, among many indigenous communities around the world, when decisions are made, they're made for all people. While the dominant society says, look out for yourself, look out for number one, we know that we are all included in everything we do. So we are also very connected, not only as people of God, created in God's image, but we are connected through this ordered world. And there's nothing that any of us do that does not affect one another. How many of you have read the book by Robin Kimmerer, Braiding Sweetgrass? I figured that. I figured this crowd would have known that this book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Indigenous Wisdom, Scientific Knowledge, and Teaching of Plants. She writes, she said, in the old times, the trees talked to one another. They'd stand in the council and they would craft a plan. When I watched Lord of the Rings years ago, this is a good Saturday or Sunday afternoon to spend 4 hours watching this movie. And so when the scene came up of the trees talking to each other, for indigenous people, that was no big deal. That's why we love this piece of the trees talking to each other. But science decided a long time ago that plants cannot communicate because they lack the mechanisms the animals used to speak. But there's compelling evidence, she writes, that our elders were right. The trees are talking to one another via pheromones, hormone-like compounds that are carried in the breeze. And then she writes, the roots of the trees in the forest are often interconnected by networks of mycorrhizae and fungal strands. The fungi search for mineral nutrients in the soil, and they deliver them to the tree in exchange for carbohydrates. She said this system of interconnectedness, think about these roots. It's like Robin Hood. You take from the rich and give to the poor. So all the trees arrive at the same time with this carbon surplus. They weave a web of reciprocity, of giving and taking. In the way the trees all act as one because the fungi have connected them, she writes. So listen to this. Through unity, she writes, they have survival. All flourishing is mutual. Soil, fungi, tree, squirrels, boy, all are beneficiaries of this giving and this taking. So then she goes on to write that trees grow and accumulate calories at different rates depending on their habitats. So one would think that each tree would fruit on its own schedule, but they don't. They don't. If one tree fruits, they all fruit. Not one tree in the grove, but the whole grove. Not one grove in the forest, but every grove. All across the country, she writes, and all across the states, The trees act not as individuals, but as a collective. What a wonderful thought. Exactly how they do this, she writes, we do not know. But what we see, she writes, is the power of unity. What happens to one happens to all. We can starve together or feast together, she writes. All flourishing is mutual. My friends, I hope our time here as we gather for immersions collectives this afternoon today and tomorrow as we exchange ideas to hear the wonderful ministry going on just from this room alone. May our time here help us to think more about our commonalities as beloved people of God, called to recognize that despite our uniqueness, we are all really the same people. And may our time here be time here and beyond when we go back home, be times that we think beyond ourselves, not thinking about ourselves, but thinking about the next 7 generations. So may we starve together, or may we feast together. Amen.
And amen. And Bishop, are you staying with us for our panel? That would be awesome. So we're gonna get the panel up, and if you're in panel, the first panel, go ahead and come up because I left my phone over there, so I don't have your names right now. But if you're you're here, fantastic. Hey, Abby. So we're gonna have a quick panel discussion about Bishop David Wilson's Jazz Note, which, Bishop, while they're all getting settled, I'd love to ask you just a quick question. Yes. Can you describe for me a moment, and you might not be able to, but that's okay, a moment in your ministry where you feel like the church started to think about generations ahead?
Thank you. Yeah, sitting in cabinet in the Great Plains Conference, which is all of Nebraska and Kansas, we're blessed to see churches that think about their survival. One particular piece is one United Methodist Church who had a building that was not in the best of shape, and they thought about themselves, so they communicated, they got together with the Lutherans. I know there's a lot of Lutherans here, and another group, and so they sold their building and renting from the Lutherans so they can think about their survival into the future. Think about other generations that would have a presence, a spiritual presence there in that community so they could continue on. Not thinking about themselves, but thinking about the community.
Wow.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Can we thank Bishop Wilson one more time for getting us started? And so what I'd love for us to do is let's start down on the far end from me, Luke. Luke, if you could quickly introduce yourself to us and then share with us and this is for everybody, introduce yourself, where you're from, very quickly what you do, and then just a word that has resonated with you from Bishop Wilson's Jazz Note, and we'll start there.
I'm Luke Edwards. I'm the Associate Director of Reimagining Congregations for the Western North Carolina Conference of the United Methodist Church. It takes me 2 breaths to say all that. But yeah, so I've been connected with Fresh Expressions for over a decade now, and in that have seen what a generational shift has looked like within the United Methodist Church, from a model of church that resonated with older generations to now seeing that we need other models of church to resonate with younger generations. So I think the 7th generation principle that the bishop shared last year and this year really highlights, I think, a deficit in the United Methodist Church and a failure to think for 7 generations, that only 37% of United Methodists are under the age of 60. And so if we don't start thinking with a 7th generation mindset, we're going to have a much smaller church. And it's an opportunity for some of us younger generations to really step up and to start thinking that way.
Thanks, Luke.
I'm Edgar De Jesus. I'm from the North Carolina Conference. So if you happen to be in the North Carolina Shout out to you all. I'm serving 2 rural churches. So if you happen to be in a rural church, I'm with you. I'm also wearing a hat, Duke hat, but I'm the world president of the Wesleymen, which is the World Fellowship of Methodists of Uniting Churchmen. So we covered about 80 denominations that are part of the World Methodist Council. So I'm overseeing so much engagement with the ecumenical movement. When I hear about what you said, Bishop, about generation, I think about crossing the boundaries and building bridges, because we got so much division nowadays in so many fronts. So Fresh Expression, I believe, offers us a gift. It's a gift from God to build bridges. And it begins with relationships. The biggest challenge in my local community is loneliness. People are looking for a place to belong. And if they cannot find it in the church, they will find it somewhere else. So the mandate for us is to really fill in the gap and find a way on how we can build bridges and try to offer a sense of belonging. The belief part can come later. Important is for them first to belong so that they can become and they will believe.
Morning. My name is Pastor Sarah Schaff. I serve as assistant to the bishop for community engagement and emerging church in northwestern Ohio of the ELCA, and I'm also a DEM. I am your Lutheran on this panel, and one of my favorite things that I get to do is I get to invest in lay leaders. I get to help them figure out what God has uniquely gifted them in, and I get to help them discover their testimony. And you can see it, like you can see the spark in people's eyes when they find the story, the proclamation that they have, their gift. And usually it's because someone stewarded that, right? So you can watch it pass through the generations. And I have found that people who have found that also make space for other people to find that. And so I see that in Fresh Expressions. I see that in our work with lay leaders to empower them, is that people who have been invested in tell their story. They make space for God's love to be known, and they invest in other people. And I love watching that trajectory just play out.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Wu Kang. I am from the North Georgia Annual Conference, and I'm one of the pastors of the Net Church, and I had the privilege 3 years ago to plant our 4th campus called At the Table, which is a curated dinner worship experience for those young folks that have been hurt by the church, have left the church, or don't want anything to do with the church. So a word that you use, Bishop, there's 2 that stuck out to me, but the first is prepare. And I'm in this whole sermon series of looking at opposites of words, and while I was reflecting of prepare, I thought the opposite maybe is repair. And the mindset that a lot of us in ministry or the traditional church setting has had is a repair mindset of looking at the past and trying to repair what is broken. But what does it look like for us to have a prepare mindset, which I believe is being present now and looking at the future simultaneously? And then the second word is flourishing. And I think because I am a part of the church, and I do think, and Michael always says, it's a relationship. Fresh Expressions in the local church is in relationship with one another. We expect Fresh Expressions as the new innovative things to be flourishing, but as a local church, we need to flourish at the same time. And I think that Fresh Expressions shouldn't just be another option, but it is a call for us as well to flourish and to be innovative.
I'm Pastor Abigail Broca. The Fresh Expression I lead is a mobile app ministry called Everyday Sanctuary. And I'm also oversee and support church planting and innovation in the Upper New York Annual Conference. The deep connectivity is the word that came to mind as we talked about this. I think the circle is a beautiful symbol for that. And I think what's often on my heart when I think about Fresh Expressions is there's quite a big leap from somebody coming into church nowadays. And so what are the stepping stones that we can create for the generations that are younger than us and that are yet to come?
I'm Pastor Matt Rawl from New Orleans, Louisiana. Louisiana Conference. Thought so. Thank you.
We're out here.
We're all still
We're out
recovering from Mardi Gras, so like we're still. It's a real thing.
Love it.
Yeah, so Pastor Abingdon, author, also co-founder of the Hub for Innovation with Pastor Rachel Billups. The thing that struck me about this, the 7 generations, is that it doesn't treat time linearly as much as it does relationally, right? We've heard that time is relative in the science classroom, but theologically time is relational, right? When the band is playing, you're not checking your watch. When the music stops and you're miming, tick, tick, tick. Time bends and shapes according to gravity. When the gravity is heavy, time slows. Like Good Friday, that's why the Gospels say at 3 o'clock this happened. There has to be a marker so that we can find sense in the gravity. So we need to pay attention to the gravity that we create, because those are what marks time for the generations. So that's what caught me, is let's pay attention to what we're leaving, the gravity of what we leave behind in what we're doing.
Awesome. Okay, panel, so that's all they sort of knew that we were going to do this morning. I did send an email. It was like, hey, a word from what the bishop said in his jazz note. Now all the questions are like, rapid fire, here we go. Not rapid fire, we'll go slowly with this. But I want to ask Luke and Wu and Abby. One of the things I heard Bishop Wilson just say to us in quoting the elders, that we borrow this land. Is that what I heard you say? And so I'm curious, how might that land for us as leaders inside of the community of faith, leaders inside the church? Some of that looks like land, buildings, footprints, and some of that is, I think, our traditions, our liturgies. How might we think about borrowing as Fresh Expressions practitioners? And I'll just leave it there. Let's start with Abby, and then Wu, and then Luke.
Well, I think the way this relates to my ministry, personally at least, is hosting a mobile app is not easy, as Fresh Expressions have learned. But it's a daily spiritual practice that's based on our Christian practice, our lectionary, our verses from the Bible, but it also includes deep breath prayer and gratitude. So how do we introduce the land that we've been standing on that has nurtured us, but in ways that are accessible and reachable to people, in ways that are not built up edifices maybe, but are like the nourishing ground that we experience in our faith?
That's a good question. I'm still trying to process this. But what's on my mind is, how many times has churches and ministries colonized, right? And in the same way, we sometimes think because we have a new idea, because we have a new way of doing things, that this is the way, and that's what we're going to bring to you. But the reality is I'm coming here to share space with you and to learn from you, instead of bringing something that I think you need, colonization. So that's what I think of, is how can we do ministry in a way where we walk alongside you rather than think that I'm coming with the answers. And when we do these things called Fresh Expressions and innovative ways of doing ministry, and I'm guilty of it, I'm like, man, they needed this. But no, I needed to be here with you.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to looking back into you mentioned our traditions. So I think about our fresh expressions in Western North Carolina that have tapped into our history as Methodists, of inheritors of John Wesley's ministry. So I think about Deep Time back in the corner, which is one of our networks of fresh expressions, and I think you'll hear from them at some point. But they're in West Asheville, and they create spiritual community and dignity and jobs for people who have gotten out of incarceration, and have a fresh expression in the jail there as well. And so this is a direct seventh generation from John Wesley's work in the jails. And so I just think about things like that. Think about a Moravian friend that I have who, Angelica Regulata Ciesa, she's in Winston-Salem, and she has a fresh expression with Hispanic, Latina immigrants around education and helping navigate the education system. And when she did research around the history of her faith, her Moravian faith, found that the Moravians, the origins of Sunday school for the Moravians was a time when they could teach kids who didn't have access to learn how to read. And so she could tap back 7 generations back in her faith. And I think that just brings a lot of strength to the work that we're doing, to be able to see how those generations have passed it on to us.
Oh, that's good. My next question, it's going to actually be for Sarah and then Edgar. The other thing of many things that I heard the bishop say was a duty to protect. So I'm curious, in this moment, what are we protecting for the next generations?
Probably more than one thing, but I think we have a duty to protect the belovedness that we're called by God in baptism, right? If God calls us beloved, right, then the world is not allowed to take that away, right? And a system shouldn't take that away. And we have to create spaces where that belovedness can thrive, and it can grow, and it can play and create new things. And I think there are a lot of spaces in this world where that is not happening. And so when we can create fresh expressions or places where people can find that, even for a short period of time, it changes how people interact with others, how they treat other people, and who they are as they live out their faith and serve the world. I still believe that once you catch it, once you've felt love, you can embody it in a different way. Right? As Lutherans, we believe that God gives you grace and gives you love before you could ever earn it or deserve it, right? It's pure gift for you on the worst moments of your life, right? And so when you felt that you don't deserve something, you don't earn it, and you're loved anyway, and God looks at you and calls you beautiful, then you can embrace others and serve in a different kind of way in the world. And I think that changes communities. And there's a lot of spaces in this world that don't protect that, and we should be gritty and savvy and just really protect that.
That's good. Yeah.
I think about the word of John Wesley when he sent, I believe, Thomas Coke and Francis Asbury as they go to the frontier of this new America to plant what we now call the Methodist movement. He said these words, offer them Christ. Offer them Christ. I think, and I believe in my heart, that we owe a lot to the next generations because we have this evangelical mandate as people called Methodists, and not just Methodists, but all Christians, to really do our best to offer them Christ. Because we know that the Christ who came on the first Advent will be the Christ that will come back again on the next Advent. Can we hear amen, church? He will come back again, and I think we have a responsibility, and I'm preaching on the sermon series now on Revelation. We have a mandate to reach out to the young generation, because our lives in this world is not all that there is. There will come a time that we will be judged by what we have done and what we have not done. And so there is an evangelical zeal that is embedded within our own DNA to reach out and to do whatever it takes, from everywhere to everywhere, to share the good news, not just to the current generation, but most especially for the future generation.
Amen. Let's keep the mic at Bishop Wilson. I want to ask a question for him, and then Matt, I want to invite you to follow up here. So, good luck. At some point, there's something indigenous about this mutuality that you've talked about. There's something that is just, I feel like, in ourselves as human beings that does not just think individually. And as you said, doesn't just think about our family right now and even just the next step, but like there is this continuity. We've come from a people, we are a part of a people that, what breaks that? What happened to us that you've got to come and give us this talk, as opposed to it's there, like we just know it, like breathe. What happened to us that we have to relearn this idea?
Thank you, Derek. You know, for indigenous Christians, what happened was the Christian church. Because so I think about this as the Haudenosaunee, who mostly known for the 7th-generation concept. So many tribes had it before Christianity came, and said, no, it's about individualism. It's about this, and this. So that's what did it, not just for this, but for many pieces for indigenous people. Before Christianity came, people lived in community. There were no fences. There were no boundaries. Everything was shared by everyone. And then when the government, the church came, they said, we got to make you people like everybody else. So you got to own land. You got to have fences. And so they took away the land and created systems where we had acreage and lots. They had no idea what to do with that. And so it's the Christian church that for many of our indigenous communities now, and Christian communities, we're having to undo that, to reclaim our indigenous 7 generations. And that's just a piece of it, especially this commonality. You know, we're very intergenerational. In our families, a lot of you folk who are old enough to have kids going off to college, many of you are ready for them to go and move on down the road. Now, in our communities, we don't leave. We don't leave. When we graduate, and then there could be 5 generations living in a house. Not because they have to, that's just because they want to. And so they share and understand what that means, what we get to pass down for that. So for us, it's just undoing what the early church has and missionaries have taught us about what it means to be a Christian.
Wow.
Yeah.
So Matt.
So I come from white mangroves.
Yeah.
That tries to get as much soil as possible.
Yes, and?
Yeah. So the one thing we can say about the past is that it is what got us here today, for good or ill. And again, what I love about this is we like to plant and build and take up space with the bold assumption that it will be here forever. The sadness in that I see in my own kids, because I have crowded them out from their own footprint, right? If my church takes up the whole block, then they have no room to spare for their own calling, right? I've talked to my kids a lot about this, that I hope every time a statue is erected, there's a 50-year time limit on it, period. Not because it doesn't matter or it isn't good or right. It's we have crowded out the next generation from putting their footprint down, right? So again, this idea of I would say build things for their seventh purpose, right? A sanctuary becomes a daycare, becomes a retirement center. It is torn down and becomes green space, right? And to write that in, because we are so bold in thinking Jesus is going to return in our generation, whichever our generation is, so it doesn't really matter, for them. So, yeah.
Okay. This is an invitation. It's not an all play, but I need at least one of you to answer this question. One thing the Spirit is leading you to do in this season of your life and ministry, to starve and feast with others in mutuality. One thing. Just one thing.
I'll do one.
Here,
Okay.
come on, Sarah. Yeah.
All right. So I'm not going to talk professionally. I'm going to talk about when I'm not running around in my job. I get to help host a dinner church in a community advocacy center in Port Clinton, and really, to be quite frank, I don't have time, but I need it. Like, I need to learn the gifts that the people, it's every time I make plans for that ministry, I learn that they're wrong, and people have something else planned that's so much better than what I would have dreamed up. When we planted that, Mike Beck could have told you that, of course, people in recovery would become the backbone of that ministry. Like, he could have told me that how many years ago when he broke my brain and first started talking about fresh expressions. But I have gotten to witness that. And a lot of times when I'm trying to do all of the other things, it's what sustains me. It's where I feel the Holy Spirit moving and inviting in new life.
Thank you, Sarah. One thing the Spirit might be, so now I'm asking at least one more person to answer the question. One thing the Spirit might be inviting you into so that you might both starve and feast in mutuality with others. Wow.
Well, I think the era of the solo hero leader needs to be crucified, right? The future is collaborative and adaptive, right? Because if I'm here teaching, there's no mutuality in that, really, right? And I love that even as we started this space, right, it is us, right? So in terms of feasting, because when I also make room, I also don't get a say in what happens, right? So I might have to lean into famine in order to make room for others. So yeah, solo hero leader needs to, in the church and everywhere, needs to become collaborative and adaptive, period. And I think that helps us get there.
And that's what you feel called to do
Yes.
now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Last question, I want to ask it of the bishop. I'm really grateful for you starting the conversation for us. Is there a unique way of honoring the ancestors that helps the next generation stay connected? Is there a unique way, something unique about honoring the ancestors that really helps those who are coming after us to stay in this flow of this story, these generations?
Great question. I think from an indigenous piece, I think it just living out and understanding teachings. I'm almost said ancient, but they're teachings that we still use today throughout our tribal communities. For our instance, I think about, my people come not too far from here. I'm in the southeast jurisdiction, almost all these tribes that were removed who are now in Oklahoma there. And all of them had their own trails of tears. And the Methodist Church came and evangelized among our people. And people say, given what the church has done to your people, why would you want to be Christians? And one of my elders said, when they first came, we said, tell us about this religion. And they said, well, it's about loving Creator, loving God, and taking care of one another, loving each other. And the people said, we already do that. And so that's what made it easy for us to convert. How it was lived out was a different story. And so we think about our ancestors who made it on the trails of tears from really around the world, but especially this part of the country, who 30 of our people died, suffered. And even when they got to Oklahoma, one of the very first things they did was to rebuild their churches. Think about that. Rebuild it. In southeast Oklahoma, there's some Oklahomans here I know, but in southeast Oklahoma, there are churches there, the very first Methodist churches, long before the white churches came along, that are still existing today. So I think about emulating that faith that they hoped that would go on for the next generation, whether it's in the church or outside the church, but the faith that things are going to be better, and to think about the faithfulness that enables me to move on and to do the work we get to do. Yeah.
Can we thank our panel for helping us think about 7 generations? Thank you, friends.